In this last section of chapter 15, we look at choices in the public sector. And to do this, we're going to utilize public choice theory. So as I mentioned in the first section of this chapter, public choice theorists, originally these were economists who said, it doesn't make sense that we assume producers and consumers are self-interested, but that politicians work to maximize the social welfare, or in other words, are benevolent social planners. Why don't we use the same assumption, namely that politicians are just selfish like everyone else? And selfish could mean they just want to get reelected, or maybe that they're going to try to rip off the taxpayers and get as much money for themselves, right? Or somehow cheat the public. But in any case, they don't have to necessarily be malevolent, like the case of cheating the taxpayers, but just self-interested, like looking out for their own job. Probably is a reasonable assumption. Sometimes this assumption of politicians acting to maximize social welfare is called public interest theory. And I already pretty much described it, but they define this term cost-benefit analysis here. And it's worthwhile to spend a few moments describing to you what cost-benefit analysis is. Well, essentially what it is using the tools of applied welfare analysis. What's that? Consumer surplus, producer surplus, and then together total surplus. And trying to analyze whether policies, what's the total surplus associated with various policies. And so for example, California currently is considering building a high-speed bullet train from San Francisco to LA. Is this efficient? Well, how would an economist answer that question? First of all, they would try to estimate the demand for high-speed rail. That's not the easiest thing ever because we don't have anything like it, at least in California. But they could use various techniques that have been developed over the years to try to estimate the demand curve. The costs are somewhat easier to estimate because you can ask the engineers, how much would it cost to build the line? Maybe you can look around the world to other countries that have high-speed rail and estimate the costs. So then you can estimate the supply curve and look at whether the benefits are greater than the costs. So that's cost-benefit analysis. Public interest theory holds that politicians make decisions in order to maximize net benefits. In other words, they're implicitly doing cost-benefit analysis, trying to maximize social welfare. That might be true in some cases, but not all cases, and this is why the public choice perspective is useful. In this section, they apply public choice theory to two areas. One is turnout. They call it economics and voting, the rational abstention problem. But really the question is, do you vote? Or did you turn out to vote? Right? How many people turn out to vote? In America, or the US, we find not that many. Right? Many people are eligible to vote, but less than half of them usually turn out to vote. Why is it? Well, if you think that a voter is self-interested, they want to maximize their benefits or utility. And so what is the benefit of their action of voting? Well, if they support some policy, then if the policy is passed, they get the benefits. But does their vote have a big impact on the result of the election? Probably not. If there are millions of voters out there, then whether I turn out to vote or not, the chance that my vote swings the election is so small, I'm probably more likely to be hit by a car while walking to the polling station. And so this brings up that there are costs of voting as well. Right? So the benefit is, if my preferred policy wins, I get a benefit, but the cost is I have to wake up early maybe, take half an hour out of my day and vote. And you may say, well, that's a trivial cost. But so is the expected benefit of my voting. Because whether I vote or not, the outcome is probably going to be the same. So many people rationally abstain from voting. Now, there are other benefits from voting, including that you feel like you're fulfilling your civic duty. You get to wear a sticker that said, I voted today. And so you get to walk around showing people that you fulfilled your civic duty. So maybe this public choice model doesn't take into account these other benefits. But if you consider the benefits only that result from your swinging the election, those are so small that the cost of them surely outweigh in almost all cases. Unless there's a very small electorate, like a very small city, where you have not that many voters. That's really the only situation where your vote has any chance to affect the election. The next situation that they look at are legislative choices and special interests. And so now think about not a voter being the actor who we're interested in, but a member of Congress, a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. In the United States, we have taxes on imports. And we have a chapter coming up on international trade where we'll discuss this in more detail. One of the imports that is taxed is sugar. And so a tax on imports is called a tariff. Why do we have a tax on sugar? Well, we produce sugar in the United States. For example, in Louisiana, around the Gulf of Mexico, we have sugar farmers. They don't want cheap foreign sugar coming into our market, so they have pressured the legislature to impose taxes on them. Now, you might say that seems kind of crazy because there's only a few farmers in a few states that produce sugar. How come they have so much influence over the legislature? Well, who is harmed by this import tax? Who in the United States is harmed? Forget about the folks in Brazil or these other countries who are producing sugar who have to pay the tax. They're harmed by it. But think about which Americans are harmed by it. The consumers. Good. So we all consume, most all of us consume sugar in some way or the other, right? So we pay a little bit higher price for sugar as a result of this tariff. But the additional price that we pay is so small that we hardly notice it. So we have no incentive to even write a letter to our congressman saying, you should repeal this sugar tax. In fact, probably most of you, if not all of you, didn't even realize we had a sugar tariff. Because it doesn't really affect you enough for you to really notice it. But those farmers in Louisiana, they sure notice it, right? If all of a sudden imported sugar is more expensive, then they can sell their sugar for a higher price, and therefore profits are going to be a lot higher. So they have a strong incentive, not only to write a letter to their congressman, but to lobby him as hard as they can, right? To donate to his or her campaign, right? So this is the effect of special interests. Now, I'll leave you with just one effect of this import tariff that you may have noticed. Some of you drink Coca-Cola or Pepsi or other soft drinks. Have you ever read the ingredients? How do we sweeten those beverages generally in the United States? Corn syrup. How do they sweeten Coca-Cola in Mexico? With cane sugar. Do you think that the difference in the choice of sweeteners is due to the preferences of Americans for corn sugar? Or no. It's due to the fact, most likely, that cane sugar is expensive, more expensive than corn sugar, and part of the reason is because of the import tariff. And so if you're Coca-Cola, you're a big consumer of sugar, right? You buy a lot of sugar. And so the fact that the price is a little bit higher of cane sugar means that you're going to be more likely to switch to corn syrup. And in fact, I think there's evidence that a lot of Americans prefer cane sugar because we see Mexican Coke being sold in the United States. And it's trucked fairly large distances in heavy glass bottles. So that's a bit of an inefficiency in some ways. But anyway, this is, one of my colleagues referred to this before as a taste of protectionism. Because the tariff is there to protect American sugarcane farmers. But that protectionism has a taste that you can notice. Because there's a difference between Mexican Coke and United States Coke.